This is a Fox News alert. I'm Brett Baer in Washington. Just up the road, a city on edge tonight. Protests have spawned violence in Baltimore as you look live there following the funeral of the 25-year-old African-American man whose death in police custody has sparked a week of demonstrations. Now, social media today urged young people to go on a purge, a reference to a movie about urban lawlessness. Then there were reports that nationally known criminal gangs were vowing to assassinate police officers. Clearly a very dangerous situation in Baltimore, still developing just down the road from the nation's capital. Correspondent Doug McKelway is live in the middle of it all in Baltimore tonight. Doug.
Brett, we're sitting just outside the entrance to the Mondawmin Mall, about a quarter of a mile away from the entrance to Druid Hill Park, where the Maryland Zoo is, the Baltimore City Zoo. This was the scene of rioting not much more than a half hour ago. If you look on the street behind me right now, you can see debris, a lot of bricks, a lot of rocks. I'm holding in my hand right now a very large brick that was thrown at somebody here not too long ago. The protesters have moved down this direction towards the inner city and towards the Baltimore inner harbor, I should say. This on the day that police sent out a press release saying that they had credible information that the Bloods and the Crips and a group known as the Black Guerrilla Family, two Baltimore area gangs, were combining together to center into a partnership to take out law enforcement. That, too, on the very day that Mr. Gray, the victim of this police incident 8 days ago, was laid to rest.
The funeral was held this morning for 25-year-old Freddie Gray, whose death 8 days ago behind the closed doors of a Baltimore police transport van remains under investigation. Hundreds came to the New Shiloh Baptist Church to praise his life, to comfort his family, and to seek justice.
Although I believe that our mayor and our new prosecutor, Marilyn Mosby, are up to the job, we need to look forward to a structural change where they're not put in this position anymore.
A visibly shaken and angry Maryland Democratic Congressman Elijah Cummings signaled not only legal redress for Gray's death, but legislative as well.
We will not rest until we address this and see that justice is done.
There was no visible sign of a police presence at the funeral, not that it would have been welcome here. A community convinced that police excess caused Gray's death. The anger erupted in violence on Saturday night as a peaceful protest made its way from the African-American neighborhoods to the more touristy Inner Harbor, where some storefront windows were smashed, police cars vandalized, and a few police officers were injured. 35 people were arrested. Fans at the nearby Orioles Park at Camden Yards were forced to stay in place at the game's end until the violence abated. Later that night, Baltimore's mayor inexplicably appeared to give license to the rioting.
We also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well.
When I first heard this comment by the mayor, I thought, has this mayor lost her mind? She basically sanctioned a riot.
She later walked back the remark, but tensions remain high. Today, some businesses in the Baltimore campus of the University of Maryland closed early. Some streets were cordoned off. Neighboring police departments were called in to supplement Baltimore's force. Freddie Gray's death, an apparent spark that ignited years of pent-up frustration in the black community, some of whom see zero tolerance, aggressive policing, and the war on drugs as an invitation to harm.
What does your average black man in Baltimore City think of the cops in the city?
What the average black man in Baltimore City think of the police department? That they are liars, thieves, and murderers.
That's harsh words.
Yeah, but it's harsh. It's a harsh reality because we lied on, we're arrested for any little thing, we abused, we are violated, and they don't approach you at all like you're another human being or you're a man worthy of respect.
And now to the police investigation. As you see, more officers with riot gear congregating about a half a block away from where we now stand. The internal Baltimore City Police Department investigation is supposed to be wrapped up this Friday. The Department of Justice has its own civil rights investigation ongoing, and key to both of those investigations is the fact that Mr. Gray was put in that police van in an unbuckled situation. That is against department rules. The New York Times reported this past weekend that there was another case in Baltimore of a prisoner being put in a police van unbuckled, and he suffered very, very serious injuries when police decided to give him a quote-unquote rough ride. Brett, back to you.
Okay, Doug McKelway live there in Baltimore. It's important to point out this investigation is ongoing, and there are many good police officers in Baltimore trying to keep the peace tonight. We're monitoring all angles of the Baltimore rioting and the response. Shepard Smith is in the news deck, Fox News deck up in New York. Shep.
They've been very busy, the police, and they're having a hard time of things. I can show you over in the wall here. Brett, this is the center of it all, really, where some of the protesting had been happening earlier. A lot of looting happening here. That's a liquor store there, and then a number of different businesses up and down this street. If the camera were to pull out and show you just over here, authorities are now massing at many different locations sort of around this area. And it would appear from the chopper coverage that they're working to establish a perimeter, in other words, keep the lawlessness contained to an area and then try to shrink that perimeter over time. I can tell you that since this began about 3:15 or so this afternoon, Baltimore and Washington time, it began with a few people throwing rocks and bricks, a number of cops coming at them in riot gear, but the cops being pushed back as they were vastly outnumbered by the demonstrators. And then the cops were forced at some point, or made the decision at some point, to retreat. And after they did so, they've been massing in different areas, as you can see right here, waiting presumably at some point for the call to go back and take back the streets. Their time is short, sundown about an hour and a half away, and these sorts of situations are much more difficult in the dark of night. We have reports of at least 7 police officers officially from authorities injured. One of those 7 police officers with broken bones. Another said by the spokesperson for the Baltimore City Police Department to have been unresponsive upon first contact. All of those officers were taken to the hospital. We do not have a number of individual arrests on the street, but we have seen authorities take a number of what appeared to be young men into custody. One after he'd been jumping up and down on a police vehicle, along with a dozen or more people destroying a police vehicle. One of those, at least, was arrested, and there have been a number of other arrests. During the 5 in the last hour, some of the hosts were asking about where is the civil rights community. Well, the man who gave the eulogy for Mr. Gray earlier today during that funeral about which Doug was reporting came forward and said this is the last thing they need for their message. Listen.
I'm in pain for my city. I'm really in pain for our children. This is not representational of the movement that we're a part of, that we're seeking out justice. This is absolutely mayhem.
And it certainly is, and it has continued to be throughout the afternoon from the multiple feeds that we have from the area. And we're really able to get a better sense of things from the air. We've not seen the kind of looting that we were seeing earlier. We've not seen any more fires started. And we've seen police officers remaining completely out of this area. You can see traffic is still on the move, people are still on the move, but authorities have set up, or are trying to set up, it would appear, some sort of barrier around all this so that they can eventually, hopefully, go back and take the streets back. The main question now is, will they have the manpower to do that? Baltimore City Police obviously stretched and have been. Some state police have been called in. We're told as many as 82. Prince George's County, some people called in. Some City of Washington troops have been called in. In other words, a lot of different police organizations have been brought in to help, but they will find coordination a very difficult thing unless they have radio systems where they can communicate widely and make sure that they're coordinated in their effort. There would always be a concern at a time like this that someone with a weapon who might fire it would begin a new level of trouble that frankly and thankfully we've not yet seen. Whether authorities will be able to do that is a matter for reporting of the minutes and hours ahead, Brett. But right now, the pastor said there is mayhem, and there is.
Shep, live in the news deck. We'll head back for any breaking details on the ground there. Let's get more now from Sheriff David Clark. You heard him earlier from Milwaukee County, Wisconsin. Sheriff, welcome. As you look at this situation as it develops, what are the challenges here for Baltimore Police, and what would you do?
But it doesn't look like...
Well, total chaos right now. The informal social controls broke down, obviously. If I were Baltimore City officials, I'd rehuddle. bring in more resources, which they already should have had marshaled in place. I was surprised. I was shocked that they did not have it. I want to see a better execution of the plan. I think there's still time to regroup, get these officers, Baltimore's finest, some additional resources. As soon as they started taking on casualties when the rocks and bottles were being thrown, they should have executed or implemented, I should say, phase 2 of the program. You bring in reinforcements. They should have had strike forces of 20 to 25 officers that could have moved into any area, including the store, to take that thing back over. So I'm a little puzzled as to what their operational plan is, but it's not looking very good at this point.
You know, Sheriff, we're told that the governor has not declared a state of emergency yet. We're told that state police have been mobilized, but not in great numbers so far. And, you know, you're critical of the plan as it's developed here. You've also been critical of, as we look live in Baltimore, of the mayor, who said that they were projecting to protect cars and buildings, but, quote, we also gave those who wish to destroy space to do that as well.
Total capitulation to these rioters and looters, an abdication of her responsibility, I think, not only to the Baltimore Police Department, but to the law-abiding people, the overwhelming majority of law-abiding people that live in this community where this thing is going on right now. Appeasement has never worked anywhere in the United States as a strategy. It's a failed strategy, which is why I would encourage them to regroup, rehuddle, and come out with a better plan to execute and give these Baltimore police officers a chance to get this thing under control, but they have to have the resources.
Sheriff, what about, as Shep mentioned, as darkness falls there in Baltimore, the additional challenges that police face on the ground?
Well, darkness always brings a new element to the thing because of concealment, which adds more danger to the law enforcement officers. Shame on the governor at this point that hasn't declared a state of emergency. All of America's watching this. I'm watching this in utter disbelief that he or she, the governor of Maryland, doesn't think that a state of emergency should be declared. To give the people in Baltimore some sense that their government officials are in control and have their arms around this thing, and so they can quickly restore order, because that's job one. The National Guard at this point should be deployed. And these are calls that the mayor and the governor and other people on the ground there have to make. But you're asking me what I would do. We had a situation similar to this in Milwaukee in December, and I called in for the National Guard to be on standby. They were marshaled in the Milwaukee area and ready to go at a moment's notice. You can't start to mobilize as this stuff is going on in the theater in here. You have to have a marshal and station where all you have to do is throw a switch, load these men and women up with the National Guard and get them in, just if nothing else to form the perimeter around these areas where I'm seeing uniformed officers, and then take those officers, form strike forces, 20 to 25, that can move to hot spots, to trouble spots, to move those people out. I'm seeing people allowed to mingle and gather. You have to keep people moving. As long as they're going to continue to do that, that's where your large crowds start to, over time, start to build up, and then you got problems on your hands.
Sheriff, I want you to listen to the Gray family attorney. After the funeral today for Mr. Gray, he came out and talked about some of these protests, some of them that have been violent.
If there's no respect for order, there will be disorder. If there's no respect for law, there will be lawlessness. And we have to remember that as much of a quarrel, a serious quarrel we have with the police, we still need them to protect the citizens of Baltimore. We don't want this town to become mob town again.
Sheriff, I mean, there was a lot of anger. There just are not answers yet in this investigation about Freddie Gray and how he died in police custody. What do you say to this African-American community that is angry, confused, but now tonight on the streets?
Well, it's misguided, and I don't think there's a lot of leadership coming from the area there, not only the political leadership, but some of the community leadership, because I think the frustration is misguided. We all want to know what happened to Freddie Gray, but let's face it, Brett, that these rioters and looters, they didn't know Freddie Gray. They weren't associated with Freddie Gray. With the black-on-black crime that exists in the city of Baltimore, and I have a few statistics, 90% of the homicides committed in Baltimore. The victims are black. 90% of the suspects are black. They should be just as frustrated with that. We'll deal with the police, the problems they have with the police. I think it's worthy of a discussion. It's not worthy of a riot, but let's place their anger and frustration where it really needs to be, and that's at the feet of the city officials there in Baltimore.
Sheriff David Clarke from Milwaukee County. Sheriff, we appreciate your time tonight. We are monitoring the situation live in Baltimore. There is other news today. After a quick break, we'll update you on the other stories and keep you up to date with everything that's happening on the ground in Baltimore.